the question that needs to be asked: does this verse prove that the Catholic Church is the true church? Welcome to Two Truths, where we explore controversial topics in religion, philosophy, and history from at least two different perspectives. I'm Dr. Darren Yamarino, and today we're going to be looking at part 2 of the Gospel of Matthew. So we left off in part 1, pretty much we went over like the Lord's Prayer, and that was a big focus. Now we're going to jump, many chapters. There's so many great things, but I have to only focus on what I can really, is the most maybe provocative material. So I'm going to jump all the way to chapter 16, verse 13, and we'll dive in there. This is a pretty important passage. It's here that Jesus reveals that he is the Messiah and makes Peter the rock of the church. Now, the question that needs to be asked: does this verse prove that the Catholic Church is the true church, or does it not prove that in the slightest? I'm sure there'd be a lot of different opinions that people could have here, and again, always welcome it in the comments. Let's sort of break this apart a little bit. Okay, on the pro side for the Catholic Church, if the Catholic Church wants to try and claim Peter as effectively the foundation and, bedrock of their church, then it does seem that this verse might be suggesting that somehow there's some superior claim that Peter has been given the keys, if you will, keys to the kingdom. So sure, maybe, and Catholics have used it this way for many, many years. Now, it's pretty easy to counter this idea. First of all, we got to place ourselves in the proper historical context. First century Mediterranean Near Eastern world. What happens after Jesus' death is that basically the Jerusalem church and Jewish Christianity is kind of the norm, basically. And yes, Peter is involved, but not in Rome in this sense, but with the Jerusalem church. But James, Jesus's brother, is the one who takes over effectively control of the Jerusalem church. So what is the true church? Followers of the way before they're actually called Christians, which that first happens in Antioch, another important center of early Christianity. So it's really, where do you want to set the timeline, and how do you want to define Christianity and the church? All that is going to matter. But you do have these main players: Peter, James, and then Paul. Among others, but those three are arguably the most important. And James is sort of going to be in charge of this Jerusalem church, which is going to eventually be scattered and destroyed because there's going to be a whole lot of problems with Rome, which opens up the doorway for more of the church in Rome, or some of the stuff that Paul has been doing, right, with the Gentiles. So there's a lot of clashing between Paul and James and Peter, and who's really the authority. And we kind of have this seemingly coherent narrative for Christianity now, but there was no really great unification or cohesion in the first century, or even in the beginning of the second. There are just a lot of different options. You could try and make the case that the Oriental Orthodox Church, or the Coptic Christianity, or the Greek Orthodox Church, right, that somehow these have a great claim to antiquity and authenticity. So I mean, I don't think that we should take this one verse as some definitive proof that Catholicism or something is the only true heir to Jesus's ministry. But if you wanted to make that case, right, it's a good verse to focus on for you. Right? Let's jump, though, to another topic, totally different, arguably much more important than who's really the true heir of the church. Let's jump all the way to 21:18. Bizarre line here. Very strange story where Jesus is going to wither the fig tree, seemingly for no great reason. And it almost seems out of character for Jesus to do this, but it's symbolic, of course, and we need to look at what's really going on here. In the passage, it shows that the fig tree has great leaves, right? Like, the tree itself seems great. The problem is it's not bearing fruit. So let's look at this a couple different ways. One, let's just kind of look at this maybe philosophically, teleologically, like the telos. What's the end or purpose of a tree? And I would assume, arguably though, my guess, that a tree's purpose is eventually to bear fruit, right? Now, you could say it's to grow tall and have a bunch of leaves and, I don't know, provide shade or something like that for other animals. But that's not generally, I don't think most people would agree that it's to bear fruit, right? If we want to think about the idea of it being a tree that's lush, that provides shade, that kind of brings us into the symbolism that you typically would hear for this, which I could tie that to the idea of the Jewish sort of elites of the time, where you've got like a growing power of the Pharisees, and they claim to have the keys of knowledge and understanding the Torah. And it's like they wear nice clothes, they're seemingly boastful, and might pray in public and all this sort of stuff. And like, hey, I'm the big tree, basically, and you can find some sort of understanding and relief under me. But Jesus is basically claiming here, it's like, no, a tree should bear fruit, right? So your faith should show works. It should show metanoia. It should show total transformation of your heart and mind. Right? True faith isn't just some legalistic contract. So that's really what is going on here, is it's like a critique of the Jewish authority structure at the time, because the Gospel of Matthew is pro-Jewish, but anti-Jewish establishment, effectively. So that's typically what most people are going to say is going on here, which I tend to agree with. That interpretation makes sense. I'd like to expand upon that a little bit, and we think we could talk here about faith without works is dead, right? From James. To go back to James, right? So that's a really important point, and it's going to feature heavily in our next verse as well. And one thing to add on here, though, to the faith without works is dead. Too many people, I would actually just say a lot, I might even argue the majority, but a lot of people that claim to be Christians are guilty of something called presumption. So this is a theological vice. Now, perhaps you've heard of Aristotle's golden mean. This is the idea that for every virtue, like courage, there's a vice of deficiency, so cowardice in this case, but there's a vice of excess, which is also not virtue. And so the vice of excess for courage would be recklessness, right? It might seem on the surface that some, general charging into an ancient battle when they're really just suicidal and bringing 1,000 troops with them to all die, that might seem heroic and courageous, but it's reckless. If that's really was their underlying motivation, some sort of self-destructive, right, sort of tendency. So true virtue for Aristotle is in this kind of like mean, right, this middle point. And we can apply that to the theological virtues like faith, hope, and love. So if we think about something like faith, if you have no faith and you're in a state of complete disbelief, or hope, which would be like despair, you have like absolutely no hope, right? That's a vice of deficiency. But on the excess side for faith, we have presumption. And this can manifest as, and I'm sure everyone listening to this has experienced this before, someone who's a Christian saying like, hey, look, like trying to maybe convert you or something like, oh, all you need to do is say that you accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior and get baptized or something like that, right? Like I've done that, so I don't even need to really attend church. Maybe I don't need to read scripture, something along those lines, but I don't care because I'm confident I'm saved and I'll claim to be a Christian, right? But no, Jesus and many of the other early Christians are making it clear that it's like, you need the works, okay? It's not that the works are necessarily saving you. It's that the works are the evidence. They're someone by their fruit, right? Like it's the proof of the transformation that has been effected by the correct form of faith. So all that kind of relates in here, I think, to 21:18 with the withering of the fig tree. And it's an important topic, which is also going to serve as a perfect little segue to our next stopping point, which is chapter 25, verses 41 through 47. A great passage here where essentially Jesus is going to claim like the fact that you dismissed all these other sick, poor, homeless, whatever, people that are around us and in the environment shows like that basically you haven't once again accepted a universal form of compassion or love. You haven't had a total transformation of your heart and mind. And it means that you don't understand me and my message. So like basically it's the equivalent of you not helping me, right? When you stepped over the homeless person who was suffering, right? As an example. So it's a great lesson, powerful sort of imagery, applies very much today, just as it would then. And I should note that at the end of this, it states, and these will go away into eternal punishment, but the righteous into eternal life. So there's a lot of like hell talk in this section as well of the Gospel of Matthew. Now, what's the underlying theme or issue that we can talk about here? Salvation can be discussed, I think, here. In our last passage, when looking at faith and works, I was suggesting like, hey, the works are needed. They're critical because that actually is the proof, right? That you have changed. Now, I think we need to take a step back here and go into the first century and look at our main options for salvation. Number one, if we're Jewish, salvation comes through the law, following it very strictly. And there are 613, right? Like commandments. There are a lot in the Hebrew Bible. So that's how salvation works. God said, do all these things. If we do it, God has also made a covenant with us in the sense like a legal contract that God will perform his part if we perform our part, right? That's how it works. And salvation is more understood in terms of this worldly material, land, possessions, and descendants. And we can argue later as to whether or not there is an afterlife in that component. So like that's the sort of more like maybe Jewish, ancient Israelite kind of understanding. Then we have the notion of, why don't we jump to a different one? Gnosis, which is a revealed secret form of knowledge. Now, different forms of Gnosticism are going to claim if you don't have this saving secret knowledge, you're screwed. I mean, when you die, that's it. Or at best, you're stuck in this solar system, effectively, under the realm of fate. So, I mean, unless you're a Gnostic and you know the secret passwords and ways of ascent to get out of this prison that we find ourselves in. So the law, one, gnosis, or saving knowledge, is another. Then we've got a third, which would be faith as understood by John the Baptist, Jesus, Paul, all these early Christians. This is an extreme form of faith that is not legalistic in this way, where it's not rational even necessarily, right? It's supra-rational. It's something that will take you and create a phase transition of your soul, which means that it's a faith of high temperature, pressure, intensity. It's not an easy way of life. In some ways, it is very easy, right? To like follow the law or the rules. It's like, here's the commandments, right? It's a list. I do them and all will be well. But John the Baptist and Jesus are calling you to like a wholly different way of living. And that is very tough. So it's a unique form of faith. That is what will create salvation for you. So that's a third option. Then last but not least, we could isolate out works. And this has been an issue with various groups throughout earlier Christianity as to just how important works are. Are they required for salvation in this like merit-based system? Or is it just that works are something that should naturally develop and manifest if you have the proper faith? Now, that is the generally agreed upon answer with a lot of groups, is that, yeah, you actually need to have the faith transformation plus the works that prove that. But it's not the works themselves that will actually affect the salvation piece. But who knows? It could be argued. Maybe it's about grace and unmerited favor. Maybe it's actually does require you to do certain specific actions in order to make it into heaven or whatever other afterlife situation you might envision, right? So that's a great sort of passage. Let's jump. We don't have much more to get to. In, I think it's 26:63, so we're getting farther into the Gospel of Matthew now. There's a charge against Jesus where he's arrested, right? And they basically charge him with blasphemy for stating that he's the Son of God and possibly that he could rebuild a temple in 3 days' time. There's some huge problems here, which is that they kind of have this like night trial of the Jewish Sanhedrin or elites, and that can't happen on Passover because you can't leave your house at night. You're not supposed to on Passover, according to Exodus 12:22, I believe it is. The second issue here is, well, why wouldn't Jesus be stoned to death? Because that is the legal punishment for blasphemy. So what's really going on? Now, it's because they kind of have to shift to like sedition when they bring him to trial or to like Pontius Pilate with the Romans, that sedition is more problematic situation in the eyes of the Romans. And that's going to lead us to sort of one of our last things for today, which is 27:24, where we have a pretty unfortunate quote that has been misused for hundreds of years, right? With Pontius Pilate is supposedly like washing his hands. He's saying like, right, I am innocent of this man's blood. See to it yourselves. Like, and then the people that are there, the Jewish people that are gathered, will say like, you know, his blood be upon us and our children. Sort of this blood curse type of idea that develops. The reason why this is such a troubling line is that it has been used to justify anti-Semitism for forever, really, on a Christian context, at least, because you're accusing the Jewish people of deicide, right? Basically killing off God and taking the blame themselves. The evidence for this like anti-Semitism can be found all over the place. Passion plays in the Middle Ages where Jews are, you know, horribly portrayed. The Crusades stuff there. The Inquisition is a big example. Jews being blamed for the plague. The list goes on and on. They're just essentially become the scapegoats throughout history for a lot of problematic historical events. And it's lines like this that can help to justify that. Now, really, there's no good reason to accept that somehow this has to do with all Jews. For one thing, there's only a small amount of Jews there. So if you want to blame them, then blame that small group that's there. Not all of the, you know, Jewish people is extreme overreach, for one thing. Then it's like Jesus essentially is supposed to die for everyone's sins, not for some group, but excluding Jews or this group of Jews or whatever. So it doesn't really make good sense, this notion, but it's important that people know that line because it's been misused for hundreds of years. Last but not least, I want to look at 28:2 and compare it to the Gospel of Mark. Now, in the Gospel of Mark, you might recall that when Jesus is dead and we're dealing with the resurrection and Mary Magdalene, like, you know, shows up and the stone's been rolled away already, and there's a young boy sitting there, not Jesus, in white linen. And I said it's probably or maybe the same boy that ran away naked during the arrest. But it's a boy, clearly, in the Gospel of Mark. Not at all in the Gospel of Matthew. Gospel of Matthew, we have a situation where the angel of the Lord comes down and rolls the stone away and then like kind of sits on it, I think, on the stone, and then gives this similar speech to what the boy supposedly gave to Mary, the Marys, or whatever. So interesting that here we have in Matthew, and I believe in Luke, as we'll see as well, that it's a shift away to more like, well, Luke, I can't remember, it might be different. If it's angels, plural, I think, but we'll get to that. It's not the one young boy like you do have in Mark. So there seems to be a desire to alter and shift away from that first older narrative that you have in the Gospel of Mark. So that's all I want you to see. It's a good example, like between even these synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, who kind of see with one vision, have the same sort of stories, parables, etc., whatever. There are some important differences, right? And that's just one. We'll see with Luke next time. that there are many others. So make sure that you check that out in the coming weeks when I do get to the Gospel of Luke, because there will be some fun stuff there as well. So until next time, be well.